Two Distant Strangers is an incredible short that won the Oscar last year in 2021 for Best Live Action Short Film. It was written by Trayvon Free and directed by Trayvon Free and Martin Desmond Rowe. And here's the official synopsis. A man trying to get home to his dog gets stuck in a time loop that forces him to relive a deadly run-in with a cop. It's available on Netflix, by the way. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. And it's about half hour long. So definitely a quick watch. And I super highly recommend it. It stars Joey Badass, which for those of you who don't know is a Brooklyn rapper who also acts, clearly. And I was first put on to his music, which I appreciate, randomly. Just like going through like old 90s hip hop and like stuff like that. Like one of those like playlists on Apple. And 90s, 2000s, I forget like the name of like the playlist, but he came up, even though he's like a 20-something-year-old, almost 30-year-old rapper, you know, he's a modern day rapper, but he definitely raps in the 90s, 2000s like type of style. Like if you would have told me that, yo, listen to this rapper, he's the 18th member of Wu-Tang or some shit, I would have believed you. It's definitely like my kind of hip hop, says like thought-provoking shit, something to think about, and has a dope 90s, 2000s like type of vibe. His latest album, titled 2000, is really good too. Definitely check it out. But I was also put onto him on the acting side when I was watching that show, Mr. Robot, which I have broken down here on the Spun Today podcast in the past. And also I featured a scene from Mr. Robot starring Joey Badass recently within one of my videos of the week in my free weekly newsletter that you can all subscribe to at spuntoday.com/subscribe. So it's starting him. It's also starring Andrew Howard, which is that Russian mafioso from the movie Limitless, if you guys remember, with Bradley Cooper, who played a really cool character. And it stars Zaria Simone. And basically, Joey Badass's character, Carter, wakes up in this girl's apartment that he clearly spent the night with. They hooked up from the night before, didn't know each other before then. That girl is Zaria. And they're, kicking it in the morning, just shooting the shit a little bit as he's getting ready to leave. And then he goes outside and he's in this nice neighborhood. It gave me kind of like Upper West Side, Manhattan type vibes. And Andrew Howard's character, Officer Merck, starts fucking with Joey Badass. He's just standing outside, puts his headphones in, sparks a cigarette, and Merck starts fucking with him, because there was actually a guy walking by with coffee, and Joey Badass went to put his book back on and like knocked into the guy's coffee, and it went on his shirt, and he like apologized to the guy, said he'll give him money for his dry cleaning or something like that. They, exchanged some words. The guy was pissed, and the guy left, and then the cop came over. Because he heard like that commotion. He was like, is something wrong here? And he was like, no, everything's fine, whatever. And then the cop just like kept fucking with Joey Badass. And he was like, let me see what's in your bag. And he was like, you can't do that. Like, I know my rights. And the cop was like, I know your rights too. Let me see your fucking bag. And just like starts overstepping his boundaries as bad cops do. And Joey Badass, tries to like walk away. The cop threatens him, tells him not to walk away from him, and throws him up against the wall, starts searching him. He's like, hey, you can't do this. What are you doing? And he's resisting. And there's a lady there nearby selling fruit. And she, pulls out her phone and starts recording. She says, what are you doing? He didn't do anything. Leave him alone. All this commotion and stuff going on. And Joey Badass's character not complying is like enraging him more and more. And you see the police officer get more and more upset at just like being on the wrong side of this agreement. And winds up calling in for backup, and a couple other cops come and they wind up choking him, and he's on the ground face down, and Officer Merck is choking him, and he has like this maniacal look on his face, and he just like keeps choking him. And Joey Badass's character starts to say, I can't breathe. And it's obviously reminiscent of the Eric Garner case here in New York, who was choked out in a similar fashion. It's also reminiscent of the George Floyd of more recent history, and he dies. Then the movie, or the short film rather, loops back, and he wakes up, and he's back in Zaria's apartment, just waking up the same way he did before. And he's having like the weirdest case of deja vu. Everything that we saw happen is like re-happening again in the apartment. He goes outside, sees the same person walking in, sees the same person walking down the block, sees the same cop, Officer Merck again. This time he dodges the guy that has the coffee, so nothing happened there. And Officer Merck still comes up to him, starts fucking with him, tells him that, you know, like he thinks he's smoking weed and that it's not really a cigarette. He notices like a wad of money that he has in his pocket and he says, "What, are you a drug dealer?" And a similar thing happens, but he tries to walk away. And then the second time he winds up getting shot because Officer Merck sees him like grab either his wallet or something out of his bag, and he's like, gun, or he like says, you don't go for my gun, like something along those lines, and he winds up shooting him and killing him, which was reminiscent to me of the Philando Castile case. If you guys remember that, it was the guy that was in his car in the passenger seat, or in his girlfriend's car. His girlfriend was driving, 4-year-old kid in the back, and he had a permit for a weapon, told this clearly inexperienced officer that he does have a weapon on him, but he has a permit for it. And the officer obviously clearly overreacted, wound up shooting him to death in the passenger seat with the 4-year-old in the back, and his fiance girlfriend live streaming it on Facebook the entire time. So this instance of police brutality was reminiscent of that. Then same thing happens after he dies. He wakes up in the girl's bed again, and now he's catching on to like what's happening. He's like, I'm like stuck in this weird like loop thing, and he's like, fuck it, I'm not even gonna go outside. And then you just hear like after a while, he's chilling with the girl making breakfast, and you hear banging at the door, like hard banging, and the girl goes towards the door and it's like, police, open up. And then she like looks through the people and they're about to ram in the door, and they do. And he has, they're making breakfast, and he has a knife in his hand. It's like a blue, one of those like kitchen knives. It's like clearly like a blue color, like a pastel color, and it's a knife. And they're like, gun, or they're like, weapon, and they shoot him and kill him right away, instantly. And that was clearly reminiscent of the like no-knock warrant deaths of like an Amir Locke or Breonna Taylor. And then boom, he wakes up again in the bed after he dies. And then there's just like a montage of like different things happening, him trying different things each time, coming out and trying something, like just like coming out the building and darting down the block and starting to run. And then that Officer Merck winds up chasing him anyway and like shooting him and killing him, or, a bunch of different things wind up happening. And there was a scene actually that was kind of funny. He was, in the morning, in like the deja vu scenes, like the first like 2 or 3 times, there's a vase that she walks by and she accidentally knocks over and it breaks. And then by like the 4th or 5th time or something like that, he like runs and catches the vase before it drops. And she's like, okay, Odell Beckham Jr. with them hands. And then he replies, look how quickly we forget Jerry Rice. And I just thought that was a dope line. So then he's speaking to her, he's confiding her, he's like, listen, I think I'm stuck in this like weird loop thing. I have done this before, we've done this before, I know what you're gonna say, this is what's happening, this cop keeps killing me, and then I wake up here in your room again. And she's like, have you tried like talking to him? And he's like, kind of give him the idea, and then he just winds up like going up to him, and he goes up to the cop, he tells him, yo, we're in this like deja vu loop, and he proves it like with the surroundings. And he says, watch, that kid on the skateboard, he's about to fall. Boom. Look at that lady over there, she's about to take a selfie. Boom, it happens. Look at that guy over there, he's about to, XYZ. And then Officer Merck is like looking around, and he's like, are you fucking with me? And, he's like speaking to him, he was like, no, I'm not fucking with you. No, this is, it just keeps happening over and over again. This is like the 100th time. And the officer in realization, he's like, so if I shoot you now, and this was a dope line that was like underscoring the theme of the story, I guess, from my perspective. And the cop says in realization, he's like, so if I shoot you now, we're just gonna continue doing it all over and over again. And it's kind of like, to me, a nod to, the current state of this type of police brutality, with when things like that happen, it just seems like a continuing loop and continues to happen over and over again. Which, and I feel like I have to say this, if you're listening to this for the first time and you don't know my stance on this type of situation, I'll reiterate it here, but I've definitely spoken about like police brutality and shit like that in the past. the good cops obviously far outweigh the bad cops. These horrible, tragic, in probably most cases avoidable stories are definitely in the minority compared to the number of interactions that police officers have with the public. But even that being the case, each one is one too many, in my personal opinion. And the way you make an honest effort to correct for that is not by defund the police or not by continuing business as usual either. It's raising the bar of who can be cops, raising the bar of how you assess who can be cops, and increasing funding specifically earmarked for better, higher quality training. But I digress. Back to the short film. So then Officer Merck decides to leave him alone. He walks away, turns a corner, and winds up getting shot by some other cops. So same thing happens again. Then the next day, then you see a little montage. He comes out and he's like, yo, Merck, I gotta holler at you. And then at this point, he just asks, Merck is like, what do you want me to do? If you just keep dying anyway. And he's like, just take me home, man. All I want to do is get home to my dog. Because he has a pet dog that they show in the beginning that he FaceTimes with, on this little doggy treat feeder thing that has a camera. And Officer Merck agrees, and they have small talk along the way. And he confides in Merck, and he starts telling him about the girl that he hooked up with. And he's like, I think I fell in love too fast, or maybe some people just fall in love too slow. I thought that was a dope line. And they have a cool banter back and forth, while they're in the car and they're driving, or Merck is driving him home rather. And they speak about, black neighborhoods being over policed. That's Carter's perspective. Then Merck's perspective is he's just putting the bad guys away, taking care of the bullies, and that, everybody's responsible for their own choices, and, the personal responsibility mantra that's very prevalent, I'd say, within law enforcement and, more conservative thinkers. Not that there's anything wrong with personal responsibility, but I just think it's a lazy blanket term that's applied to too many situations. Then Officer Merck tells him at one point, he's like, you have a way with words, kid. And to be honest, I never spoke to one of you for this long. It's interesting. And to one of you, he means a black person. Then at the end, they finally get home, they shake hands, and you see Joey Badass walking away. And then Officer Merck just starts clapping, ominously. Those slow crescendoing claps, but just slow clap, slow clap, slow clap. And then Joey Badass turns around and he's like, and the cop was in on that deja vu loop the whole time. And he, drove him home and stuff like that. And he was patronizing him. And then he wound up killing him anyway. But he berated him a little bit. He was like, oh, that was your best performance to date. You had me going there for a while. And then he kills him, and the shot pans up and shows Joey Badass on the floor, and the blood that's pooling on the ground is in the shape of the continent of Africa. And this whole thing was symbolic of no matter what I say or what I do, they want to kill me. That was a takeaway there, I feel. And, Joey Badass woke up again in Zari's apartment, and, he told her again everything that happened. And he says that no matter what, no matter how long it takes, one way or another, I'm getting home to my dog. Then it shows the flip side of that. They just want to kill me no matter what. The flip side of that coin of the resilience and tenacity of pressing forward, staying positive, and doing what you got to do. And just a couple more things I thought were interesting and a nice touch. Throughout the short, they had, not throughout the entire thing, but in certain scenes, they had Things Will Never Change playing in the background, but not the Tupac version, the original version. And as the credits rolled at the end, or before the credits rolled at the end, you just start seeing a list of names. And then every 10 names or so, dozens and dozens of names. And every 10 names or so, some which you recognize, the Tamir Rices and Eric Garners and the big national attention cases. But it's just a list of police brutality case after police brutality case after police brutality case. And every 10 or 15, you'll see the reason why the person was killed, or where the person was when they were killed. X, Y, and Z killed while playing in their backyard. So-and-so killed while she was asleep. XYZ killed during a routine traffic stop, etc., etc. And then after all that, after all those went through like credits to. At the end, there was a quote by Tupac that said, "Learn to see me as a brother instead of two distant strangers," which is from Tupac's version of Some Things Will Never Change. And that, folks, was my little recap and review of Two Distant Strangers, streaming now on Netflix. Check it out.